You know what? I never thought a stupid cryptocurrency could literally rewrite my entire existence. But here I am, 3 months later, staring at my phone at 3 a.m., wondering how the hell I got here. My name's Jake, and honestly, I was just another regular guy working a dead-end job at a warehouse in Ohio. Nothing special, man. Just trying to make ends meet, you know? 40 hours a week, loading trucks, unloading shipments, coming home exhausted and covered in dust. My biggest excitement was maybe grabbing a beer with the guys on Friday night, if I had the cash. But then my cousin Marcus started talking about this XRP thing. He wouldn't shut up about it. Every family dinner, every text message, every phone call, XRP this, XRP that. I'm talking obsessed, man. Like, religiously obsessed. At first, I thought he'd lost his mind. Cryptocurrency? Wasn't that just fake internet money for drug dealers and hackers? I messed up by not listening sooner, I thought. See, Marcus had always been the family screw-up. Dropped out of college, bounced between jobs, always chasing get-rich-quick schemes. Pyramid schemes, forex trading, even tried to get me into some essential oils business. So when he started preaching about digital currency, I figured it was just another one of his phases. Then he showed me his portfolio one day. We were at my aunt's house for Sunday dinner, and he pulls out his phone with this massive grin. $300 had turned into $3,000 in just 3 weeks. 3 freaking weeks, man. I'm looking at his screen, and I swear my hands started shaking. Jake, this is it, he kept saying. This is our ticket out of this middle-class prison we're stuck in. What was I even thinking, working 40 hours a week for peanuts when people were making money like this? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those numbers. 300 to 3,000. The math was simple, right? If I put in 3,000, maybe I could make 30,000. Maybe more. I started researching everything about XRP. Ripple Labs, bank partnerships, cross-border payments. It all sounded so legitimate, so revolutionary. I spent 3 straight nights after work diving deep into white papers, YouTube videos, Reddit threads. The more I read, the more convinced I became that this wasn't just some random gamble. This was the future of money, and I was going to be part of it. But here's the thing. I only had $3,000 to my name. My entire emergency fund. 3 years of saving every penny I could, skipping dinners out, buying generic everything, walking to work instead of driving to save on gas. That money was supposed to be my safety net, you know what I mean? The thing that kept me from moving back in with my parents if I lost my job. I remember the exact moment everything changed. It was a Tuesday, around 2 p.m. during my lunch break. I was sitting in my beat-up Honda Civic in the warehouse parking lot, scrolling through XRP price charts. The coin was sitting at 34 cents, and Marcus had just texted me saying he heard from some crypto guru that it was about to explode. My finger was hovering over the buy button on my Coinbase app. My heart was pounding like I was about to ask someone to prom. Part of me knew this was insane. That voice in my head, probably my dad's voice, honestly, was screaming that this was exactly how people lose everything they've worked for. But the other part? The other part was tired, man. Tired of living paycheck to paycheck. Tired of watching other people on social media posting about their vacations while I was clipping coupons. Tired of being 26 years old and feeling like I was going nowhere fast. I thought about my coworker Steve, who'd been at the warehouse for 12 years and was still making barely above minimum wage. I thought about my neighbor Mrs. Peterson, who was 73 and still working at Walmart because she couldn't afford to retire. I thought about myself in 30 years, still loading trucks, still broke, still dreaming about a life I'd never have. What would you have done? Seriously, put yourself in my shoes for a second. You're 26, stuck in a job that's going nowhere, watching other people get rich while you're counting quarters to do laundry. Your cousin, who's never had his life together, just made 10 times his money in 3 weeks. And everyone online is saying this is just the beginning. I hit buy, $3,000. Gone. Just like that, converted into 8,764 XRP tokens at 34 cents each. The transaction went through so fast it scared me. 1 second I had my life savings in my bank account. The next second I owned almost 9,000 digital coins that existed somewhere in cyberspace. I screenshot everything, sent it to Marcus. He called me immediately, so excited I could barely understand what he was saying. He was at work too. He drives for a delivery company, and I could hear traffic in the background as he rambled about diamond hands and moon missions and HODL strategies. That first afternoon was surreal, man. I checked my phone maybe 200 times. No joke. Every 5 minutes, I was refreshing that app, watching those numbers dance up and down. XRP went from 34 cents to 36 cents, then back to 33. My stomach was doing backflips with every cent. When my shift ended at 4 p.m., I sat in my car for 20 minutes just staring at my phone. The price was at 35 cents. I'd made about $90 in 4 hours. That was more than I made in a day at the warehouse, and all I did was press a button. I drove home in a daze, honestly. Everything felt different. The same streets, the same apartment complex, the same cracked sidewalk leading to my front door, but I felt like I was living in a different reality. Like I'd crossed some invisible line between my old life and whatever came next. I got home from work that evening, made myself a grilled cheese sandwich, couldn't afford much else until payday, and sat on my couch just staring at my phone. The number kept changing. 35 cents, 34 cents, 36 cents again. Each fluctuation represented real money that could pay my rent, buy groceries, maybe even let me take a vacation someday. Around 8 p.m., I decided to call my buddy Tom. Tom's always been the smart one in our friend group, went to college for finance, works at a bank now. I figured he could give me some perspective, maybe tell me I'd made a smart move. "Jake," he said after I explained everything, "do you even know what XRP actually does?" Honestly, I thought I did, but when he started asking specific questions, I realized I'd just memorized a bunch of buzzwords. Cross-border payments, banking partnerships, faster transactions. It all sounded good, but I couldn't really explain how any of it worked. "It's not that I think you're wrong," Tom continued, "but putting your entire emergency fund into one speculative investment? That's not investing, man. That's gambling." But as he's talking, I'm watching XRP climb. 37 cents, 38, 39. By 9 p.m., it was sitting at 40 cents, and I'd made over $500. Tom's cautious advice was starting to sound pretty outdated. Then, around 10 p.m., something weird started happening. The price began climbing faster. 41 cents, 42. The volume was increasing, and the XRP subreddit was going crazy. People posting rocket ship emojis, talking about breaking resistance levels, predicting dollar targets. By the time I went to bed, XRP was sitting at 44 cents. My $3,000 had become almost $4,000. I'd made $1,000 in one day. $1,000, man. That was more than I usually had left over in an entire month after paying bills. I couldn't sleep, obviously. I just laid there in the dark, calculating. If it hit $1, I'd have almost $9,000. If it hit $3 like Marcus said it could, that's over $26,000. More money than I'd ever seen in my life. Enough to quit my job, maybe go back to school, definitely move out of my crappy apartment. I started fantasizing about what I'd do with the money. Pay off my credit card debt. Buy a decent car that didn't break down every other month. Maybe take my mom somewhere nice for her birthday. She'd been talking about wanting to see the ocean for years, but we could never afford a real vacation. But as I'm lying there, this little voice in the back of my head kept whispering the same question over and over. What if I was making the biggest mistake of my life? What if tomorrow morning, I wake up and it's all gone? What if Tom was right, and I'd just gambled away 3 years of careful saving on internet money I didn't really understand? I must have checked my phone 50 times that night. Every hour, every half hour, sometimes every few minutes. XRP was holding steady around 43 cents. My portfolio balance kept dancing between $3,800 and $3,900. Real money. Money I could touch if I wanted to. Money I could sell and walk away with a nice profit. But I didn't want to sell. Not yet. Not when everyone was saying this was just the beginning. Not when I was so close to changing my life forever. What if I woke up tomorrow and this rocket ship I thought I was riding turned out to be something else entirely? I woke up at 5:30 a.m., which was crazy because my alarm wasn't set to go off until 6:45. But my brain wouldn't shut off, you know? First thing I did, grabbed my phone from the nightstand, squinting at the screen in the dark. XRP was at 47 cents. Holy crap, I made over $1,000 while I was sleeping. My $3,000 was now worth $4,100. $1,100 in profit from doing absolutely nothing except owning some digital coins. You know that feeling when you're on a roller coaster, right at the top, just before the big drop? That mixture of excitement and terror churning in your stomach? That's exactly how my entire body felt. I was physically shaking as I stumbled to the kitchen to make coffee, constantly refreshing the app with my thumb. 48 cents. 49 cents. Each cent represented another $87 in my pocket. I'd never experienced anything like this rush before. It was better than any drug, any adrenaline high, any feeling I'd ever had. At work, I couldn't concentrate on anything. My supervisor, Dave, kept asking if I was feeling okay because I kept checking my phone every few minutes. How could I explain that I was watching my life potentially change in real time? That while I was loading boxes onto trucks, I was making more money per hour than my actual hourly wage. "You seem distracted today, Jake," Dave said around 10 a.m. "Everything all right at home?" Everything was more than all right. XRP had hit 52 cents, and my portfolio was sitting at $4,500. I'd made $1,500 since yesterday morning. $1,500, man. That was more than I usually made in 3 weeks of actual labor. During my lunch break, I called Marcus. He was losing his mind with excitement. His original $300 investment was now worth over $4,000. He'd also put in another $1,000 that morning when the price dipped to 45 cents. "Jake, this is it," he kept saying. "This is our golden ticket. I just heard from this crypto influencer who predicted XRP would hit $5 by the end of the month." $5, man. Do you understand what that means? I understood perfectly. $5 would mean my $3,000 would become over $43,000. Enough to pay off all my debts, put a down payment on a house, maybe even quit my job and figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life. I messed up by believing every word he said. That afternoon, Marcus sent me links to YouTube videos, Telegram groups, Reddit threads, all full of people talking about XRP like it was the second coming. Technical analysis showing support levels and resistance breaks. Fundamentals about Ripple's partnerships with major banks. Predictions that range from $10 to $100 per coin. The energy was intoxicating, honestly. Being part of this community of people who saw something the rest of the world didn't understand yet. We were early adopters, visionaries, the smart money getting in before the institutions and big investors drove the price to astronomical levels. Around 2 p.m., XRP spiked to 55 cents. My phone buzzed with a notification from my trading app. My portfolio was worth over $4,800. I actually laughed out loud in the middle of the warehouse. A genuine, uncontrollable laugh that made my coworkers look at me like I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had lost my mind. But if this was insanity, I wanted more of it. I started doing math in my head that probably wasn't very smart. If I could make $1,800 in 2 days, what could I make in a week? A month? At this rate, I'd be a millionaire by Christmas. I'd never have to load another truck, never have to worry about rent or grocery money, never have to feel stuck again. What was I even thinking? This was easy money. This was my ticket out. During my afternoon break, I found myself scrolling through luxury car websites, looking at apartments in better neighborhoods, researching vacation destinations. It felt so real, so close I could taste it. For the first time in my adult life, I felt like I had control over my future. Around 3 p.m., and I'll never forget this exact moment, XRP spiked to 63 cents. My phone buzzed again. My portfolio was worth over $5,000. I doubled my money in less than 48 hours. $2,000 in profit from pressing a button on my phone. I called my mom during my break. Couldn't help myself. Didn't tell her about the crypto stuff. She'd have worried herself sick, but asked her about that ocean trip she'd always wanted to take. Started talking about maybe planning something for her 60th birthday next year. She got so excited, started talking about this bed and breakfast in Maine she'd seen in a magazine. Jake, honey, that sounds wonderful, but you know we can't afford something like that, she said gently. Maybe we can, Mom. Maybe things are about to change. But then something shifted. Maybe it was the way my coworker Steve looked at me when I tried to explain cryptocurrency to him. Maybe it was the fact that I'd spent the entire day doing nothing but staring at numbers on a screen instead of actually working. Or maybe it was just that little voice in my head getting louder, the one that sounded suspiciously like my dad. Steve listened to me ramble about blockchain technology and digital assets for about 5 minutes before shaking his head. Jake, you know what this sounds like to me? It sounds like gambling. My brother-in-law lost his house playing the stock market back in 2008. Started with a sure thing, ended up with nothing. I tried to explain that this was different, that cryptocurrency wasn't like stocks, that the technology was revolutionary. But as I was talking, I realized I was using the same words I'd heard from YouTube videos and Reddit posts. I wasn't explaining my own understanding. I was repeating other people's talking points. That bothered me more than I wanted to admit. That evening, I tried to have a normal dinner, watch some TV, but I couldn't focus on anything except those numbers. XRP was sitting at 59 cents when I went to bed. Still up massive from where I started, but down from the day's high. That 4-cent drop represented about $350 I'd lost in a few hours. Funny how quickly perspective changes. 2 days ago, $350 would have been a fortune to me. Now it felt like a loss because I'd seen my portfolio worth more earlier in the day. I started reading different forums that night. Not the bullish ones Marcus had shown me, but the skeptical ones. Forums where people talked about losing everything. Stories of people who put their life savings into crypto and watched it disappear overnight. Stories that sounded uncomfortably similar to what I was doing. One post stuck with me. A guy named David from Texas who'd put his daughter's college fund into Bitcoin at the peak in 2017. Watched it drop 90% over the next year. The worst part, he wrote, wasn't losing the money. It was realizing I'd risked my family's future on something I didn't really understand, just because I was afraid of missing out. That hit me hard, man. Fear of missing out. FOMO. That's exactly what had driven me to buy XRP in the first place. Not careful analysis, not understanding of the technology, just pure fear that everyone else was getting rich while I stayed poor. I laid there thinking about my dad. He worked the same factory job for 37 years. Never took big risks, never gambled, always said slow and steady wins the race. Saved for 10 years to buy his first house. Took him 20 years to pay off the mortgage. Never had much money, but never worried about losing everything either. What would he think about his son putting his entire emergency fund on a cryptocurrency he'd never heard of? A cryptocurrency I'd learned about 3 days ago from my screw-up cousin who'd never held a steady job in his life. As I'm drifting off to sleep, I made a decision. Tomorrow, if XRP hit 70 cents, I'd sell half. Take some profits, be smart about it. That way, even if things went south, I'd still be ahead. I'd have my original 3,000 back plus some extra, and I could let the rest ride. Reasonable plan, right? That's what I told myself as I finally fell asleep around midnight. But deep down, something felt different. The excitement was still there, but it was mixed with something else now. Something that felt a lot like fear. What would happen if I woke up and everything had changed? What if this rocket ship I thought I was riding turned out to be something else entirely? What if all those people on the forums warning about crashes and losses knew something I didn't? But XRP was different, I told myself. XRP had real partnerships, real technology, real use cases. It wasn't just speculation like those other cryptocurrencies. Tomorrow would bring more gains, more validation that I'd made the right choice. At least, that's what I hoped as I drifted off to sleep, my phone charging on the nightstand, my dreams filled with numbers and dollar signs and the promise of a different life. I woke up at 3:33 a.m. to my phone buzzing like crazy. Notifications everywhere. Text messages from Marcus, alerts from my trading app, emails from crypto news sites. My first thought was that XRP had mooned while I was sleeping. Maybe it hit that 70-cent target, or even higher. Maybe it had jumped to $1. I grabbed my phone, still half asleep, squinting at the bright screen in my dark bedroom. Opened my trading app with shaky fingers. 27 cents. I blinked hard, thinking my eyes were playing tricks on me. Refreshed the app. Still 27 cents. Refreshed again. 26 cents now. My portfolio, which had been worth over $5,000 when I went to sleep, was now sitting at around $2,300. Man, I lost almost $3,000 in 6 hours. While I was sleeping, while I was dreaming about ocean trips and new cars and financial freedom, I shot up in bed, wide awake now, my heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. Started frantically scrolling through news articles, Reddit posts, Twitter feeds, anywhere I could find an explanation for what was happening. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type. Apparently, some regulatory news had dropped overnight. The SEC was making moves against Ripple, questioning whether XRP was actually a security that should have been registered. Banks were backing out of partnerships. Some major crypto exchange had announced they were delisting XRP, pending the outcome of the legal case. But it gets worse. So much worse. The entire crypto market was in freefall. Bitcoin was down 30%. Ethereum was crashing. Altcoins were getting absolutely slaughtered. It wasn't just XRP. Everything was bleeding red. I called Marcus immediately, even though it was barely 4 a.m. He answered on the first ring, and I could tell by his voice that he was awake too, probably staring at his own portfolio, watching his dreams evaporate in real time. "Jake, man, this is bad," he said. His voice was shaky, nothing like the confident guru he'd been just 12 hours earlier. "I lost everything I made, plus some. I'm actually down from where I started." He'd lost even more than me, percentage-wise. All those gains from the past 2 days, gone. We were both sitting there in the dark, separated by miles, but united in our misery, watching our money disappear 1 cent at a time. "But this has to be temporary, right?" I asked him. "I mean, the technology is still good. The partnerships are still real. This is just panic selling." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know, man. I honestly don't know anymore." That scared me more than the losses did. Marcus had been so sure, so confident. If he was doubting everything now, what did that mean for people like me who'd followed his lead? You know what's crazy? That morning, I actually thought about buying more. The price was so low, and everyone in the forums was screaming about buying the dip. "Diamond hands," they kept saying. "This is just a temporary setback. Smart money accumulates when others panic." I messed up by listening to them. I scraped together another $300, money I had earmarked for rent, money I absolutely could not afford to lose, and bought more XRP at 25 cents. My logic was insane, but it made sense at the time. If I could average down my position, when it recovered, I'd make even more money than before. The psychology of loss is weird, man. Instead of accepting that I'd made a mistake and cutting my losses, I doubled down. I convinced myself that buying more was the smart play, that I was being strategic rather than desperate. By noon, XRP was at 18 cents. My total investment of $3,300 was now worth about $1,500. In 3 days, I'd lost more than half of everything I had. Money it had taken me 3 years to save was disappearing faster than I could comprehend. That afternoon at work was the longest shift of my life. I couldn't even pretend to focus. Dave pulled me aside around 2 p.m. and asked if I needed to go home early, said I looked sick. I felt sick, honestly. Physically nauseous every time I looked at my phone. I kept refreshing my app, hoping for some miracle, some sign that things were turning around. But every refresh just showed more red numbers. 17 cents, 16 cents, 15 cents. Each drop represented hundreds of dollars I'd never see again. My coworkers started asking what was wrong. Steve, who'd warned me about gambling the day before, took one look at my face and figured it out. "The crypto thing didn't work out?" he asked gently. I just shook my head. What could I say? That I'd lost more money in 3 days than he made in 2 months? That I gambled away my emergency fund on internet coins because my cousin told me to? Around 3 p.m., there's that cursed number again. I got a call from my landlord. Rent was due in 3 days, and I was short. The $300 I'd thrown at XRP that morning was supposed to cover the difference. Now I was sitting there, realizing I might not have a place to live next month. What was I even thinking? How did I go from having a safety net to being on the verge of homelessness in 72 hours? The worst part wasn't even the money, though. It was the realization of how stupid I'd been. How I'd let greed and desperation cloud my judgment. How I'd risked everything on something I didn't really understand because I was afraid of staying poor forever. That evening, I sat in my car in the warehouse parking lot after my shift ended. I couldn't bring myself to go home. Couldn't face the reality of what I'd done. Other cars pulled out around me. People heading home to their families, to their normal lives, to their problems that probably seemed manageable compared to mine. I called my dad, and for the first time in years, I told him everything. The whole stupid story. How I'd gotten caught up in cryptocurrency hype. How I'd invested money I couldn't afford to lose. How I'd let FOMO turn me into someone I didn't recognize. He didn't yell. Didn't lecture me about being irresponsible or stupid, even though I deserved it. Just listened while I talked, occasionally making small sounds to let me know he was still there. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. I could hear the TV in the background, could picture him sitting in his old recliner, probably trying to figure out what to say to his son, who'd just confessed to gambling away his future. Finally, he spoke. "Son, the market doesn't care about your dreams. It doesn't care about your rent or your future or how much you need the money. The market just is. It's not personal, it's not fair, and it's not interested in your story." Honestly, that hit me harder than losing the money did. Because he was right. I treated investing like it was personal, like the universe owed me success because I was a good person with good intentions. But markets don't work that way. They're just numbers moving around, driven by forces way bigger than any individual person's hopes or fears. "But Dad," I said, "I was just trying to get ahead. I was tired of being broke all the time." "I know, Jake. I understand that feeling better than you think. But getting ahead takes time. It takes patience. It takes making small, smart decisions over and over again, not big gambles hoping to skip all the hard work." I realized something sitting there in that parking lot, talking to my dad, while XRP continued to tank on my phone screen. I hadn't invested in XRP because I believed in the technology or understood the market. I'd gambled on XRP because I was desperate. Desperate to escape my situation, desperate for easy money, desperate to feel like I was getting ahead for once in my life. That desperation had made me vulnerable to exactly the kind of thinking that separates people from their money. It had made me ignore obvious warning signs, dismiss reasonable advice, and convince myself that I was smarter than everyone who'd lost money doing exactly what I was doing. The next morning, XRP was at 14 cents. I'd lost over 70% of my investment in 4 days. But I made a decision that probably saved me from losing even more. I sold everything. Every last token. 14 cents per XRP. My $3,300 had become about $900. I'd lost over $2,400 in less than a week. More money than some people make in 3 months. Gone because I'd gotten greedy and stupid. But you know what? Losing that money taught me something that no amount of gains ever could have. It taught me that there's no such thing as easy money. Every dollar someone makes in the market, someone else loses. For every success story like Marcus's initial gains, there are 10 stories like mine. People who got caught up in the hype and lost everything. It taught me that desperation makes you do stupid things. When you're afraid of being poor forever, when you're tired of struggling, when you see other people getting rich while you stay broke, that emotional state makes you vulnerable to exactly the kind of schemes that promise quick wealth. And most importantly, it taught me that my worth as a person isn't tied to numbers on a screen. I'd spent 3 days obsessing over my portfolio balance, checking my phone hundreds of times a day, letting my entire mood depend on whether a digital number was going up or down. That's no way to live, man. I moved back in with my parents for 3 months to get back on my feet. Wasn't easy, being 26 and sleeping in my childhood bedroom again. But my pride had already taken a beating. Might as well swallow what was left of it and focus on rebuilding. Picked up extra shifts at the warehouse, started a small side business doing handyman work on weekends. Nothing glamorous, just basic repairs and maintenance for neighbors and friends of family. But it was honest work, and every dollar I made felt real in a way that crypto gains never had. Slowly, methodically, I rebuilt my emergency fund. No shortcuts, no gambling, just good old-fashioned work. It took 8 months to get back to where I'd been before XRP entered my life. But when I hit that $3,000 mark again, it felt different. It felt earned. Today, I've got more money saved than I ever had before XRP tried to ruin my life. But more than that, I've got perspective. I understand now that building real wealth takes time, patience, and discipline. Not luck, not tips from cousins, not following crowds on the internet chasing the next big thing. Do I regret the whole experience? Honestly, no. Those 3 days taught me lessons about myself, about money, about risk that I never would have learned otherwise. They were expensive lessons, probably the most expensive education I've ever received, but they were worth every penny I lost. The crazy thing is, XRP eventually did recover. About 8 months later, it hit over $1. People in those same forums were celebrating, posting screenshots of their gains, talking about being vindicated. Some of the same people who'd lost everything alongside me had bought back in and made fortunes. And yeah, for a split second, I felt that old familiar pang of FOMO. What if I'd held on? What if I'd bought more at 14 cents instead of selling? What if I'd had diamond hands instead of paper hands? But then I remembered how it felt to wake up at 3:33 a.m. watching my life savings disappear. I remembered the stress, the sleepless nights, the way it consumed every thought I had for 3 straight days. I remembered the shame of having to move back in with my parents, the embarrassment of telling my dad I'd gambled away 3 years of savings on something I didn't understand. And I realized that no amount of money is worth that kind of anxiety. No potential gain is worth risking your mental health, your relationships, your basic security. The people who held on and made fortunes, good for them. But for every one of them, there were probably 10 others who held on and lost even more. These days, I invest differently. I put a small percentage of my income, money I can genuinely afford to lose, into broad market index funds. Boring stuff that grows slowly and steadily over time. I sleep well at night. I don't check my phone every 5 minutes, and I never invest money I need for rent or groceries or emergencies. I've also learned to recognize the warning signs of my own desperation. When I start feeling like I'm falling behind, when I see other people succeeding while I'm struggling, when I start thinking about get-rich-quick schemes, that's when I know I need to step back and remember why I'm building wealth in the first place. It's not about getting rich quick. It's not about beating the market or finding the next Bitcoin. It's about creating security for myself and my family, about having options, about not having to worry about unexpected expenses or job losses. That kind of wealth takes time to build, but it's real wealth, the kind that doesn't disappear overnight because of regulatory news or market manipulation. So here's my question for you, and be honest with yourself, because that's the only way this works. If someone came to you tomorrow with a guaranteed way to triple your money in 3 days, how much would you be willing to risk? Your emergency fund? Your rent money? Your peace of mind? What would you do if your cousin Marcus showed up at your door right now, phone in hand, showing you the next XRP, the next sure thing that's about to make everyone rich? Would you have the strength to walk away? Or would you get caught up in the same FOMO that nearly ruined my life? Drop a comment below and let me know. Tell me about a time you almost made a financial decision based on emotion instead of logic. Maybe your story will help someone else recognize their own warning signs before it's too late. Because honestly, if my story can save even one person from going through what I went through, from losing sleep, losing money, losing perspective on what actually matters in life, then maybe losing that money was worth it after all. Maybe getting burned by XRP was exactly what I needed to learn how to build real, lasting wealth instead of chasing digital fool's gold.